well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. Happy Election Day. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad to be with you on the program today. Yes, I have indeed voted in the Virginia elections. We're going to be talking about another state where elections are taking place, the state of New Jersey. You know, we talked with Joe Laporto from the New Jersey Firearms Owners Syndicate last week. He talked about some of the stakes here of the gubernatorial election, because in Virginia, where I live, the Attorney General is elected. In New Jersey, however, the Attorney General is appointed. So if Republican Jack Ciattarelli is able to emerge victorious today, then Attorney General Matthew Platkin's going to be out of a job, and we will likely see, hopefully see, an Attorney General who actually respects the Second Amendment, which would be a change because there are so many officials in New Jersey who do not. That actually is the topic of our conversation today. A new lawsuit filed by a coalition of Second Amendment advocates, including the New Jersey Firearms Owners Syndicate and the Second Amendment Foundation, regarding the seizure of firearms from a guy whose wife was involuntarily committed. She went to the doctor. She was pregnant. Apparently, she went to a doctor related to that. But this clinic ended up having her wrongfully and involuntarily committed to a psychiatric hospital. And then the Fort Lee, New Jersey Police Department confiscated her husband's firearms and revoked his firearms identification card, refusing to give his guns back because of his wife's involuntary commitment. As the lawsuit states, this is not a closed case. The defendants have blatantly thumbed their nose at the clear precedent of the Supreme Court of the United States and will continue to do so absent court intervention. A governmental entity simply may not prevent a peaceable, law-abiding individual from possessing handguns and other firearms in the home, full stop. So we're going to talk about it with the Kostas Moros from the Second Amendment Foundation. This is an infuriating case, but one hopefully that will be resolved quickly. I mean, I'd like to see this case be settled before it even gets to trial. I don't know that that's going to be the case, but fingers crossed. Anyway, let's get the details from Kostas Moros. Take a look and a listen. Kostas, thanks very much for coming on the program. It's good to see you, my friend.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, I sure wish this was a better topic, but this is a crazy case. You know, the Second Amendment Foundation is involved in dozens of lawsuits right now. This one, I think, is pretty unique, though, right? This is a case that's dealing with somebody whose guns were taken from them, can't get their guns back, not because they're a prohibited person, but because their wife was involuntarily committed to a mental institution.
Yeah, I mean, we have lots of cases, and all of them, you know, fire us up as Second Amendment advocates, but this one feels oddly personal. Like when California, for example, wants to take my magazines over 10 rounds, it doesn't feel personal. They just don't like guns, so they don't want anyone besides them to have them. But here, the facts of this case, I know we haven't described it yet, but they are very, you know, offensive they shock the conscience, as I think I wrote yesterday. It's that bad here.
So let's talk about the details. What can you give us in terms of the background of this case?
Sure. So the case involves Mr. Aliage and his wife, who in the complaint we haven't listed her name, but it's Miss Aliage. And she was at the hospital, and due to a misunderstanding, she doesn't speak English very well. They thought she was suicidal, and they ended up involuntarily committing her because they thought she was going to harm herself. And as part of New Jersey law, I guess they reported it to the police as well. And that same day, the police showed up at Mr. Aliage's house and demanded his firearms, which he complied with, although he was confused by why that was happening. It turned out they discovered the misunderstanding. Ms. Aliage was let out of involuntary commitment, and there's nothing to indicate she wants to harm herself. It turns out she was 7 weeks pregnant, you know, so that was probably what was causing whatever issues she had there. And so that started that misunderstanding started this whole ordeal. And when I'm going to summarize here, but basically what happened is Mr. Aliage tried to get his firearms back through a number of ways. He emailed them and they told him, well, he was told, we can return your firearms to you, but not to your house where your wife lives. You can either store them off site or you can sell them or destroy them, but you can't have them back at home. And he thought this was strange, and they kept not wanting to return him to him. And then he discovered that New Jersey has a law that says, even if someone in your house is a prohibited person or a danger to themselves, which his wife isn't, but just assume for the
Right.
sake of argument she were, as long as you attest that that person does not have access to the firearms, you can get your firearms back. So you say, I have a safe, she doesn't have access to the safe. So give me my firearms back. This is in New Jersey state law, and they still refused. They ignored their own law, and they still refused to give his firearms back. And again, summarizing, eventually what happened, he kept pushing, kept pushing. He asked for a hearing, but this was in April when this happened, that he wouldn't get a hearing until September. And he kept pushing on this. And eventually now New Jersey implemented a hearing to take away his gun rights. New Jersey it's similar to the Illinois system where you have to have a firearms permit to have firearms. And they started revocation proceedings. And that's when, we got involved, and now we filed this federal lawsuit to stop this. So it's just been an insane ordeal for Mr. Aliaj. I did summarize this just to not get into the weeds here, but if you read the complaint, it's not too long,
Yeah.
and you'll see several more disturbing details.
That is insane. What is the rationale for trying to revoke his firearms ID card?
Sure. So they use a lot of people immediately assumed this was a red flag case. It's actually not. That's what I thought too when I first heard the facts that they red flagged him. Neither him nor his wife, for that matter, have had extreme risk protective orders issued on them under New Jersey state law. So it's not a red flag case. It's actually arising out of their firearm ID cards. I forget what they're called. FPICs is the acronym. And those ID cards have a number of provisions that say basically if the state thinks you're a danger, if you're a threat to yourself or others, you don't get to have one of those cards. There's a few statutes they cite, none of which are applicable here, plainly. Yet they still rely on them. So that's very troubling to us. I think one says here, I can pull it up here. There's all sorts of sorry for the pause here. I'm just trying to pull up the exact wording so I don't get it wrong. So one of them prohibits the issuance of an FPIC or permit to purchase a handgun to any person who suffers from physical defect or disease which would make it unsafe for that person to handle firearms. Any person with a substance use disorder, unless any of the foregoing persons produces a certificate of a medical doctor, blah, 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 that they've been treated. Another one prohibits the issuance of an FPIC to any person where the issuance would not be in the interest of the public health, safety, or welfare because the person is found to be lacking the essential character or temperament necessary to be entrusted with a firearm. And the last one they cite prohibits the issuance of the card to any person that has been voluntarily admitted to inpatient treatment or involuntarily committed to inpatient or outpatient treatment unless the court has expunged the person's record. So remember, none of those three are applicable to Mr. Aliaj or his wife for that matter. Yes, she was temporarily and voluntarily committed, but it was by error, So, but in any case, she doesn't own the firearms and she doesn't have access to them. So they're citing irrelevant codes, and this just seems to be personal. They seem to be, retaliating against him because he sought to get his guns back.
Yeah.
It's preposterous.
So what is the relief that you all are seeking? Obviously, to have his firearms returned, but are you
Yeah.
challenging any of these provisions that the Fort Lee police are citing to try to revoke his firearms ID card? Because it sounds like some of them, Costas, are pretty subjective in nature, right? I mean, who's to determine whether or not someone's physical condition makes them unsafe to own a firearm? Is that up to the police? Is that up to a doctor? How does that even get decided?
Yeah, so this is particular to Mr. Aliaj. I don't think, let me double check to make sure I don't speak out of turn here, but I don't think we bring a facial challenge to this law. I think it's just an as applied challenge because, you can't imagine the problem. It's become very hard to bring facial challenges on these sorts of vague laws because the thing about a facial challenge is you have to be able to say it's unconstitutional in all of its applications.
Right.
And you can certainly imagine a scenario with any of those laws I just read where someone could be, you actually are a threat to yourself. You actually are a danger to the community. Then so all we're left with is an as applied challenge in this circumstance. That said, if a court ultimately rules for us, it could set a precedent that You can't be disarmed because of a spouse. In this case, the spouse didn't even do anything wrong. But even in other cases where maybe your spouse is troubled, as long as you can show that the firearms are secure and they're not able to access them, you shouldn't lose your gun rights because your spouse or some other cohabitant is unable to possess them.
Yeah, and I mean, especially when that would conflict with the statute that you just cited, that in New Jersey, even if you live with somebody who is a prohibited person, as long as they don't have access to those firearms and you attest to that fact, then you can maintain possession of your guns. I mean, that fact still seems to be sort of at the center of this case, and it seems to be something that the authorities in New Jersey are utterly ignoring here.
Yeah, they've never responded on point to why that law isn't applicable here. They've just kind of ignored it and moved past it. And we see this sometimes in states like I've mentioned before. California has the 120-day time limit to issue CDCW permits, but they just pretend it doesn't exist. So even in these anti-gun states, even when they have those rare laws that are meant to provide a little tiny bit of protection for gun owners, they just ignore them. They just don't enforce them, and so we get none of the benefit but all of the burdens.
Yeah, well, and and speaking of California, we did just see, I guess, a tentative settlement reached with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department in CRPA versus LASD. LASD apparently, Sheriff's Department says, okay, we'll start complying with that 180-day time limit at some point. I know you can't really speculate as to how this case is going to be resolved, but it seems to me like this may be a case where once the attorneys get involved, hopefully the police there in Fort Lee, New Jersey say, oh, you know what? We just read this statute, and boy, you're right. We've got to give this guy his guns back. I mean, this to me, it would be great if this maybe set a precedent in terms of, spouses being able to keep their firearms back. But for the individual plaintiff in this case, I mean, this case could be resolved like that so long as the police department gives him his guns back, right? And stops the revocation proceedings.
Correct. At this point, there's also attorney's fees involved, so they would have to figure that out. But
Okay.
but you're absolutely right that it's possible. This could go one of two ways. Either New Jersey wakes up and says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! We don't want these bad facts for us going before a court. Let's stop this and just give him his guns back." Or, sometimes these states double down and whether they're too proud or too stubborn or they hate the Second Amendment and us that much, it could go either way. We'll have to see. This case could be resolved in a couple of weeks, or it could be still being litigated years from now. God, I hope that's not the case, but that's how it can go sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on the program to talk about the contours of this lawsuit. I hope that this individual is able to get the relief that he deserves, and I hope that this, hopefully, will put other departments on notice. I mean, I don't know how common this is, but if one department can get away with it, that opens the door for other abuses to take place. So I'm hoping that we can nip this in the bud.
Me too. I know it's often in the red flag context too. It's a common problem with crazier and crazier facts leading to disarmament. So yeah, it is something we need to nip in the bud, as you say.
Absolutely. Kostas Moros from the Second Amendment Foundation. Thank you as always for joining me, sir, and look forward to doing this again very soon.
Thanks for having me on, and yes, anytime.
My thanks to Kostas for joining us on the program. We'll keep you up to date on this case, and again, hopefully this is resolved fairly quickly here. Before we get to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report, let's talk about this for just a second. From city streets to mountain trails, your gear should take you wherever life takes you, right? And that's why at Modern Rugged Leather, every bag is handcrafted from premium, responsibly sourced leather. It's designed to look sharp, last long, and tell a story of its own. Each stitch, buckle, and strap reflects timeless craftsmanship and is backed by a lifetime warranty, because quality shouldn't quit when the adventure begins. Whether it's the boardroom or the back roads, Modern Rugged Leather helps you carry confidence every step of the way. Modern Rugged Leather, modern style, timeless durability, backed for life. Life takes you places. Make sure your gear keeps up. You can shop the full collection and find yours today at modernrugged.com. Again, that's modernrugged.com. All right, let's turn our attention now to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We will start there with a case out of Texas. Here's the headline. New details emerge in case of Killeen teen accused of killing one, injuring others in a deadly shooting back in March of this year. As it turns out, this teen, well known to law enforcement in the area. Court documents showing that the 16-year-old had an extensive juvenile criminal history, was actually on probation when he allegedly shot 3 people in March. The 16-year-old is being charged as an adult now. Rashawn Raynell Isaiah Ellison appeared before a Bell County Juvenile Court back in August for a discretionary transfer hearing where officials determined that he should face charges in adult criminal court. Channel 6 in, I believe this is in Killeen, Texas, covered the previous criminal history of Ellison. 12 referrals for 16 different offenses. And he was on juvenile probation at the time that this shooting occurred. The documents in court also showed that before the shooting, Ellison had violated the conditions of his probation, had accumulated new offenses, and yet was not taken into custody, was not in juvenile detention. The diagnostic study ordered by the Bell County Juvenile Probation Department assessed him as a high risk to reoffend with moderate risk of needs. And the court determined that the procedures, services, and facilities available to the juvenile justice system would not likely rehabilitate him, saying that the court further finds because of the juvenile's record and previous history and because of the extreme and severe nature of the alleged offenses, the prospects of adequate protection for the public and the likelihood of reasonable rehabilitation of the child by the use of these procedures, services, and facilities which are currently available to the juvenile court are in doubt. Yeah. Clearly, that would be the case, right? I mean, if this guy has 16 offenses at 16 years of age, had violated his probation without any sort of consequence from the juvenile justice system, yeah, I think it's fair to say that the juvenile justice system probably can't provide the procedures, services, and facilities which are necessary for this individual. Now, again, the question is, why was this teenager out on the streets despite multiple violations of his probation, more than a dozen juvenile offenses? At what point does a juvenile delinquent get placed into juvenile custody? I don't get it. Maybe we'll get some more answers as this case progresses, but this is just another example of the fact that these problems in the criminal justice system, they don't just exist in blue states, and the juvenile justice system in particular is not well equipped to handle repeat offenders. The idea of the juvenile justice system is rehabilitation first, and when you've got somebody who's racked up 16 charges at the tender age of 16, it sucks to say, hey, maybe rehabilitation is not an option for this teenager. But at some point, you do need to come to that conclusion, right? Because otherwise, we're just spinning our wheels and allowing a prolific offender to go on and reoffend. Now, today's armed citizen story from New Mexico, Carlsbad, New Mexico, where police say a homeowner shot and killed an intruder during a break-in. This was last Thursday, I believe, in Carlsbad, New Mexico. Don't have a lot of information here. Happened around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Police called out for a report of a break-in in progress. Police said that the homeowner actually discovered a person inside the home. Another person exited the home armed with a firearm. That individual, identified as 46-year-old Michael Brooks Rawl. Police say there was a confrontation between Rawl and the homeowner, who was lawfully armed. During that confrontation, the homeowner shot Rawl, who then passed away from his injuries. Officers secured the scene, began an investigation. At this point, though, again, it looks to be a case of self-defense. The intruder, who is, one of the two intruders who was in the home, armed with a firearm, that would indicate that that individual did pose a threat to the homeowner's life. So we'll keep our eyes open for any more details here. But at this point, again, all evidence points to an act of lawful self-defense. Finally, today, our good deed of the day, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A Florida teen who helped several people stranded in a flash flood over the weekend in Boca Raton, Florida. Happened really just, it sounds like out of the blue. Thomas Rosano was at a movie theater with his girlfriend. They heard thunderstorms, He says, we heard thunder pouring the whole movie, and then on the way out, he says, we're in a flood. He said, we're going down the road. We just see cars backed up, the whole roundabout, the whole entire garage, everything, even the bathrooms in the movie theater got flooded. There were sections of Boca Raton that were stranded or submerged underwater. Boca Raton got 8 inches of rain on Sunday. And, of course, all that water in a short amount of time can't go anywhere. So there were cars that were, as Rosano says, just stranded. And ultimately, he said he jumped into the water to help drivers. He said, I went from car to car, probably 6 or 7 people just going car to car, making sure that everybody was okay. One of these individuals was actually an elderly man who was trapped in his vehicle. Rosano said we had to help him out. I think he was a little lost of the whole situation, so we helped him. He was trying to push the car after we got him out, and we're like, no, sir, we just have to get you to safety, make sure you're okay. He said we brought him to a restaurant nearby and just made sure that he's all right. Rosano said he relied on his instincts, saying that I learned it from my dad. He's always taught me and raised me right. Rosano says it's a night he'll never forget. And he says, the folks that he helped out, very grateful. He said they just kept telling me how lucky they were to have me there. Well, I'm glad that he was able to help out those folks in need in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing there in the floodwaters. 18-year-old Thomas Rosano, we thank you for your very, very good deed. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you, as always, for joining me on the program. Looking forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow. We'll probably do an Election Day recap. We've got the governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey. You've got legislative races in those states as well. You've got a red flag referendum in Maine. So we'll be talking about all of those things as it relates to our right to keep and bear arms. I got to tell you, as a Virginian, I am deeply, deeply concerned that the state is about to veer sharply towards the left in terms of our gun control laws. I am hopeful that that is not the case. It is one of the reasons why I headed to the polls today to try to prevent that from happening. But all signs are that Democrats are likely to have control of both the legislature and the governor's mansion next session. And the onslaught of gun control bills that have been vetoed by Governor Glenn Youngkin over the past couple of years likely to find a much warmer reception if Abigail Spanberger is the governor. But we'll save that conversation for tomorrow. In the meantime, hope you have a great rest of your 2A Tuesday. I'll be joining Carl Higbee on Newsmax in the 6 p.m. hour tonight. If you get a chance to tune in, always enjoy that conversation as well. And be sure to check out BuriedArms.com throughout the day today. We're keeping you up to date on all of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. If you like what you see, I'd also encourage you to become a VIP, VIP Gold, or VIP Platinum member. While the shutdown is going on in Washington, D.C., you can save big on your memberships. Use the promo code POTUS47, get 74% off your VIP Gold, or VIP Platinum membership. Shutdown might be over by the end of this week, so you want to take advantage of that now. Again, promo code POTUS47 when you sign up at BearingArms.com/subscribe. All right, we will see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.